Okay, it's 12:30, so let's get this show on the road. So, just like with my last webinar, this is my second webinar so far, there will be no 15-minute long boring introduction and sales pitch. No one's got time for that. In fact, that's got so bad on these health and safety webinars, I've just given up on safety webinars altogether. So, if you're anything like me, shall we just get stuck into it? Would that be fair enough? Yeah? If anyone does want to talk to me, if anyone does want a sales pitch, feel free to chat to me afterwards and we can arrange a call, but let's just get stuck in now. So the name is Will Taylor. For those of you who do not know me, I'm a chartered member of IOSH. I've been working in health and safety and around safety and training and quite a few other things since 2001. So this is my 20th year in the industry. So just so you know, the webinar is being recorded, and I will email you a link to the recording and the presentation, and I'll do my very best to make sure it's all anonymized as well. I want to make sure there are no names or images, so it may take me a day or two to get you the recording. And because there are quite a few people on what is a Zoom call, you're all on mute. And if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat box. So if you haven't used Zoom before, that's what the chat looks like, where that green square is. Just drop your questions in there. If I do not have time to handle questions, I'm cramming a lot into this call, I will send out an email after the call with like a Q&A to answer your questions there, and I hope that works for everybody. So now if you're anything like me, you've encountered these. Rhinoceroses. It could be your boss. That's usually the worst one, the person you report into. But it could be somebody else. Could be a senior director, head of HR. I've had a few HR directors who've been troublesome, a few IT directors, production directors, operations directors, and it could be other senior managers too. Now, lots of people are resistant to health and safety, but these people are particularly problematic because you have absolutely zero authority over them. And also they're senior people, they're quite assertive, they're quite clever, they're quite immovable, literally like a rhinoceros. Sometimes it does feel like you are stood in front of this immovable obstacle. And we've already had one message in the chat from one person saying, last chance saloon and then I'm off. Yes, that's true, isn't it? I've been there. I've literally felt like I have to wait for somebody to retire or even die before I can make any progress on health and safety. You know, and you've got that ops director who will not allow any improvements. And so I'm going to share some tips and some principles, things that I've learned during my career. And I'm sorry to disappoint you, but there will be no Jedi mind tricks at all. No Jedi mind tricks. So don't expect to walk out of here with a secret that will help you achieve victory straight away today. I'm going to share some broad principles to begin with, which should, if you apply them consistently and persistently, over time, will help gradually win people over to your side. Maybe not completely, but at least partially. Wouldn't that be a victory if we can just get some partial wins there? But I will, on the second half of the call, share with you some tactics which you can start to implement as of today in certain day-to-day interactions. And again, if you practice these things, hopefully you'll start to see more wins than defeats. So let's do some basics first, and I assume that you already do this, so I will be teaching you to suck eggs. So let's just go through the basics. You know that you have to understand and know your audience. So if you're handling senior managers and directors, you have to figure out what makes these people tick. And then you will use the appropriate legal, moral, financial argument to try and win them over. So hopefully you'll figure out whether they are money motivated, operations motivated, if they're worried about legal consequences and so on. You'll use these arguments. And it's no wonder why IOSH, NEBOSH, NCRQ qualifications, they all pretty much deal with the legal, moral, financial arguments straight away. What you also probably do is that you anticipate how these people will respond based on your experience and your knowledge of them, and you probably mentally rehearse how you will handle their responses. So this is what we call objection handling. There'll be a certain amount of mental preparation. And so I dare say, I mean, this is also called worrying, by the way. You wake up at night worrying how that conversation is going to go, and you kind of play it over in your mind. And to some extent, this will work, but it's clearly not working that well. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here on the call today necessarily. So you know that you could probably do a bit better. Now, there has been, quite helpfully, quite a bit of research on what makes senior managers and leaders and directors tick. And so if we look at the research on what we call the Big 5 personality traits, which is probably the most recognized way of doing a psychometric profile of people, and I'm not going to go into the detail of how the Big 5 traits work, but what we find is that senior managers and directors, compared to non-leaders, compared to non-managers, they tend to score in quite a few ways. They tend to score high on something called extroversion. So that means that compared to non-managers, they tend to be a bit more assertive. Yeah, don't we know it? They also tend to be a bit more gregarious. They're more willing to engage with other people and talk to other people. They're more confident. And they're also, funnily enough, they're also a lot more comfortable with risk as well. The higher you are in extroversion, the more comfortable you are with risk, to the point of recklessness in extreme cases. They also tend to be higher in something called conscientiousness, which means that managers and leaders, directors, they tend to be more disciplined. They tend to be more productive. They tend to be more orderly. And if they aren't, well, they certainly like to see that in other people. They like to see people get stuff done. They also tend to be lower on something called agreeableness, which means that they are less compassionate than their non-manager colleagues. Now, just a word of warning there. I'm not saying they're not compassionate. I'm not saying they don't care. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying they are just less than on average. And so they might care. They might be compassionate, but compared to an average of non-managers, possibly less so. They will also tend to have less respect for rules and boundaries, and possibly less respect for laws as well. Certainly less respect for systems when those systems get in the way. And they're not pushovers. They tend to stand up for themselves. So they will tell you what they think if they don't like it. And combine that with assertiveness, then that can make for quite a tricky combination. Managers and leaders tend to be lower in something called neuroticism as well, which means that they are higher in emotional stability. They are more emotionally stable, and whilst they do worry, they do get anxious, they do get stressed, on average they do tend to handle that better. Just bear in mind though that these are all averages over many thousands of people, so the individual people will vary immensely. Now, what does all this mean in practice? What does it mean for you on the field of play? Well, it means that emotionally stable people like directors are harder to scare and worry. So if you're going to use legal scare stories, that might not work quite as easily on them. And I've known this from experience. If you tell a bunch of team leaders that they can get prosecuted, they absolutely start to brick it. You tell that to a senior director, they're like, yeah, what are the chances of that happening? They handle that worry a hell of a lot better. Same thing for financial costs as well. They do have less respect for rules and boundaries. Now, that doesn't mean that they will blatantly break the law, but they might not care about complying with the letter of the law. They might comply with the spirit of the law and feel that they're doing the right thing, but they won't do something necessarily just on compliance purposes unless they are trying to mitigate some kind of legal or financial risk. They also tend to have a little bit less sympathy for other people as well. So sometimes the moral arguments don't always go down quite as well. They do like discipline and productivity, so they do value productivity in you and others. They like the organization to be well run, to be efficient and getting stuff done. They like progress and control. They also like evidence, data and proof of what you say. You can't just say things like safety if we do things safely, we'll save money. It's like, yeah, how much? How much and why? And what are your assumptions when making that recommendation? So they want some data. And they also tend to be a little bit more competitive than others. As for their assertiveness and risk-taking, they are outspoken and they will accept some risk as normal. In fact, some of them will even think that risk is desirable, that it's a good thing. So, let's go through some general themes of this presentation. I have a sales background, and so what I learned in sales I think is perfectly valid to health and safety. Health and safety is a sales role, isn't it? You are all negotiators. You are influencers, you are persuaders. You don't get people to buy stuff, but you get people to buy into health and safety. And there's a very cheesy saying in sales. If you can get someone to like you, to know you and trust you, they will tend to buy something from you rather than somebody else. And I think in health and safety, it's the same thing. If they like you, if they trust you and know you, they will be more easily influenced by you. And certainly the opposite is true, isn't it? Like if they don't like you, if they don't know you and they don't trust you, you have not got a cat in hell's chance of getting them to do anything that you want them to do. There's another broad theme in what I teach, and that is force breeds resistance. And that's the idea. And this is based on the psychological principle of reactance. If you try and force someone to do something that they don't want to do, they tend to push back and resist you. Just like pulling on these rubber bands. The more you pull, the more it resists the pull. And so what we'll try and do is we're going to try and catch more flies with the honey rather than try and catch them with vinegar. And I've learnt this at great expense in my own career. Very early on in my career, I was someone who used to tell people what to do, force my opinion on others, never take no for an answer, never compromise. I used to bang the health and safety drum. And then later on in my career, I kind of mellowed. And I started to ask people more what they thought they should do. And all of a sudden, I started to see a lot more success. I started to win people over a lot more. So those are the broad themes. Let me walk you through 4 general principles for persuading people and influencing people, which have served me very well in my career. Apply these consistently over time, and you'll start to see more and more success. The first principle is that we should aim to build relationships with our senior managers and directors. Do not make the mistake of only having interactions at formal meetings and only talking about work stuff. You must get to know them and they must get to know you. So that means your likes, your dislikes, your hopes, your fears, your values, your motivations, what you do on the weekend and your hobbies and all that kind of thing. You want to be known as a human being. You want to be known for who you are, not what your job title is. You don't want them to pick up their phone and say, oh God, the compliance manager's calling me, hang up. It has to be, oh look, Rob's calling me. I'll take that call because I like Rob. I know Rob. Rob's a human being. So we need to find opportunities to get to know people, build relationships and find things in common with them. Now, obviously, since they're senior managers, no time wasting. They value productivity. So idle chit chat, a little bit too much, too often in the wrong time and place, that won't go down well. So pick your moments well. Second principle is do your job, especially if it's your manager you're trying to influence. Now, if your manager probably employs quite a few people, and some of those people do their job really well, and they are highly valued members of the team. The odd one or two who are not pulling their weight, not getting their actions done, not doing things on time, always late, or even worse, the moaners, the complainers, the whiners, the gossipers, the high maintenance people. We don't like them. That's the God's honest truth. So if you want to be liked, do your job well. And that means be reliable. Do stuff on time with the minimum amount of fuss, the minimum amount of drama. Do it to the right expectations. And don't just focus on the health and safety objectives. Focus on the team's objectives, the organization's objectives. You're there to help the team win, not just to get health and safety improved. Now, this works for other directors as well. If you've got like a construction or project director or project manager, think about their objectives first rather than think just about yours. Like Stephen Covey said in 7 Habits of Effective People, aim for the win-win and show them that you're concerned about their objectives. Remember, people who are less compassionate tend to have less sympathy for high maintenance people. And people who are highly conscientious like it when people get stuff done, and they will judge you on your ability to do your job, and they will not take excuses. Principle number 3, and this is probably the hardest one, assume that they are right. This does assume, you do have to learn how to control your ego on this. This is a big part of force breeds resistance. Instead of assuming that we are right and pushing back and arguing our case, instead we have to be humble and respect the fact that they might have good reason for thinking what they think and feeling how they feel. We have to respect their point of view, even if we might disagree with it. And when we do that, you know what? You will remove a lot of the conflict. You'll remove a lot of the emotion. And instead of being seen as an adversary and potentially triggering those fight or flight reactions, You will be seen as a partner, a teammate, a colleague who is working with them side by side to solve a common problem. So how does that work? Well, first of all, resist the urge to argue back, control your ego. And again, Stephen Covey said, seek first to understand before being understood, which means we're going to ask questions. Instead of arguing, we're going to ask questions like why? What makes you say that? And we're going to listen intensely, actively, with curiosity to try and understand where they're coming from. And then that means that we will then feed back to them what they've said. We'll repeat back what they've said in their own words, and we'll seek to agree with them as much as we can. And this, oh good Lord. It's like, us human beings, we do tend to be rather critical. And we do, when we hear someone, especially when it's from someone we don't like or trust or know very well, we hear them talk and we focus on the things we disagree with. And we do that on social media all the time, don't we? Someone says something and then the post is like, yeah, no, I don't agree with that because nya. We must resist the urge to do that and instead focus on the things we do agree with. Happened with my wife the other day. We're struggling to keep on top of the house because we're so busy. So vacuuming, cleaning, washing, all that stuff we're really struggling with. And I suggested to her, I said, why don't we just get some help? Get help. Someone to do the vacuuming, the washing, 5-6 hours a week. Absolutely bit my head off. Pounced on me. She said, well, I don't want anyone to do the washing. 5-6 hours a week. That's far too long. Don't need that. Turns out she actually agreed with me though. She did agree that we needed a cleaner to do the vacuuming. Did she say that? No, she didn't. Straight away went for the little details she disagreed with. And what happened? Well, we had an argument. Let's avoid doing that at work. Focus on the things we agree with and validate and affirm what they say. Affirm their views. Be respectful of their views. This shows empathy. It shows understanding and that you appreciate their circumstances. If there's anything to take away from today, do not argue. The next broad principle is tell the truth, which means give them fewer opinions, give them more facts, and also it's not all negative. Give credit where it's due. So don't just go around slagging other departments off and say, oh, it's all bad, it's all unsafe, it's all terrible. No, people are doing a good job, they're getting stuff done. Is there room for improvement? Yes. And don't exaggerate the risks, or the health and safety risks either. Don't make a big a mountain out of a molehill sometimes. Don't exaggerate, otherwise you'll lose your credibility. So there we are. Those are the broad principles that if you apply them consistently, you'll see more success. But let's now get into some stuff which you can use as of today. Some tactics, as I would call them. So these are tactics designed to remove friction from your interactions with leaders and with managers. And the first tip I'm going to give you is to ask them what they think the health and safety issues are. So that before you walk in giving them your opinion, and in some cases you've only been there 5 minutes, they may have worked in that business for 15, 20, 30 years, that you're wet behind the ears. They say, don't tell me how to do my job, don't tell me what the problems are. Instead, be respectful and ask them, what do you think the health and safety issues are? What do you think should be done? And then do those things first. Even if you disagree, even if you think there are bigger fish to fry, do those things first. Because here's one of the key rules. It's like, if you want people to listen to you, and if you want people to act on what you say, you have to lead by example. We have to lead by example. As Gandhi said, be the change you want to see. So you want to see people listening to you? Great. You have to listen to them first. You want people to act on what you say? Of course you do. You have to act on what they say first. Show them the way, show them that can be done. If you do that, they will be much more likely to listen to you and act on what you say. Because if you don't listen to them, if you don't act on what they say, they'll think, well, why should I listen to him? He didn't listen to me. So act on those issues first. Another thing that we often fail to do is agree on the problem. We often try and impose a solution without getting full and frank agreement on what the actual problem is. Very often, if you're seeing resistance on a proposal, it's not because that they disagree with the proposal. It's because they don't agree that there's actually a problem to solve. Or they think that the risk is a hell of a lot lower than what you think it is. So if you're struggling to get a system or a policy implemented, chunk it up. Chunk it up to what is the actual problem and do you agree that there is a problem? If you can't get agreement on that, there's no point going down to the solution. Next tip, ask them for the solution before offering your own And I've learned this at great expense as well. And you could simply ask them. So, right, so you agree there's a problem. What would be your preferred way of fixing this? Now, I've learned that people are much more enthusiastic about implementing their own ideas than they are mine. Even though my idea might be better, in my opinion, their idea is always better in their opinion. And if I had a choice between my brilliant idea, which is implemented half-heartedly and enforced badly, I would much rather go for their idea, which is only half as good, but they implement it with their heart and their soul, and they enforce it, and they hold people to account. You know, if you've got a choice between an average idea implemented well and a good idea implemented badly, I'll go for the average idea every single time, because that's the one that will deliver change and improvement. A good idea that's not implemented well, that's not going to deliver much improvement at all. So ask them what they think should be done. If their solution is not acceptable, which sometimes it might be in breach of legislation, and you might think, well, yeah, that's progress, but it's still not legally compliant. Again, instead of focusing on the negative, focus on the positives. Tell them what you like about it first. Say, right, what I really like about that idea is this. Now, you're still going to have to disagree because the idea isn't acceptable. You might still be in breach of the legislation. So, how do you disagree without coming across as disagreeable? That's the trick, isn't it? How do you disagree with someone without being disagreeable? That's an art. One thing you can do as of today is to stop using the word but, or at least use it a lot less often, and instead use the word and. So it would sound like this. Right, what I really like about the idea of a paper-based permit to work system is it's simple and it's cheap, and we all know pieces of paper sometimes get misplaced. That sounds a lot nicer, doesn't it, than saying, yeah, I really like your idea, but pieces of paper get misplaced. Yeah, I agree with you, but. Yes, I agree with you, and. You notice how it feels different, doesn't it? Say and then ask them a question. Ask them for an improved solution. So you say, and I wonder, how could we make sure that we guarantee no pieces of paper ever get lost? Now, they might then go to your electronic system, which you've got your heart set on, or they may come up with an alternative solution. Either way, they are agreeing to implement a permit to work system, which is probably something that you would want. Next tip, if you expect pushback and resistance, be upfront about it. Tell them, right, you're probably not going to like this. Hey, I've got an idea, I've got a solution, I've got a proposal, I don't think you're going to like it. You might think I'm being over the top. Now, what does that do? It shows empathy, it shows respect for what they might think, it shows respect for their circumstances. And that's a good thing. And it also means that you're being honest and building trust. You're telling them what they might not like. Whereas a salesperson, it's all good, isn't it? Everything's good, it's fantastic. Have this car, it's a wonderful car. Yeah, but if the salesperson starts to tell you some negatives about it, of what might go wrong with it, and it's like, okay, well, I trust this person because they're telling me what might go wrong. And if I can trust them on this bit, I can probably trust them on the positives as well. And it also sets their expectations low because they're thinking, oh God, this sounds really bad. And then what you say actually isn't anywhere near as bad as they expect. And they think, oh, well, actually, that's not too bad at all. So be upfront about potential disagreements. You know, saying, well, I've got a solution. It's a bit expensive. It's a bit time consuming. Might be hard to sell to the guys on the shop floor. And then tell them what it is. And they'll think, oh, actually, that's not too bad. If you can't influence them, get their boss to influence them. So this works well on senior managers and some directors. Go through the managing director. Go through the operations director. If you've got an engineering manager who refuses to control their contractors because they think, it's a contractor, it's none of my responsibility, you know, it's them, it's their job. Okay, well stop arguing with them. Go to the operations director and say, right, I've observed these issues, and here's what the law says, and here's the best practice and the standard we've got to adhere to. I think we need a control of contractors policy. Would you agree that this is a problem? Yes. Would you agree that we need to tighten up our policy on how we manage contractors? Yes. Okay, here's the broad outline of what I would like. Do you agree with that in principle? Yes, right. Write the detailed policy, bounce it off them, get them to agree it. Right, it would really help me out if you could brief this out to the rest of the team. If it comes from you, it'll have a lot more credibility. Next thing you know, the operations director is telling these senior managers, you must do this. And then it's them who's going to enforce it. So bypass people if necessary. Don't argue with the senior managers. Go to the top. Moving on, if you expect resistance, definitely you want to bounce ideas off people one-on-one. Do not get bogged down in meetings with this. So a meeting, you bounce an idea off people for the first time, what happens? You might get mobbed. Also, you might have people in that meeting who might be allies or they might be sat on the fence. But because there's a negative person in there, they might start to rant and then influence the others negatively. And you don't want that either. So if possible, deal with people one-on-one where they can't influence others in the room. And if you're bouncing ideas off people one-on-one, you're going to identify allies as well. Now allies, this is very important, the allies, because when we're in meetings, what do we want? We want to get agreement to our proposals in meetings. And just a quick question for those of you who've got the cameras on, put your hands up if you've ever been shot down in flames at a meeting. Right, most of you then. Right, so we've all been shot down in flames. I have. Here is a simple strategy to get agreement at meetings. And it's not an easy strategy, it takes practice. On the right hand side, there's a video tutorial from one of our online courses. It's a 10-minute video. I'm going to try and do this in about 2 minutes. So this is a simplified version. You've got this lady called Jane. She's got an idea. She bounces it off this guy called Andy. Andy does not like the idea. You can see it in the subtitles there. He says, yeah, I've been having to think about that, Jane. I'm not sure it's a good idea. So there's your objection, as we call it in sales. First step, we listen actively to that objection or to that pushback. We listen seeking to understand. We listen respectfully in an accepting way. We're not listening and thinking about what could I say to prove him wrong. No. It's not that type of listening. You just want to understand. The next step is that we then feed that back to them. We repeat it back to them in their own words to validate what they've said, to show that we've understood what they've said, their concerns, and we try to agree with as much of that as we can. So I say, yes, you've got a point, it will do this, and you're concerned about this, and you're concerned about the time and this impact, and yes, you're right, it could have that impact, it could have this. Yes, you're right. And then you're going to turn to what will hopefully be an ally, but it doesn't have to be an ally. You're going to turn to the third person and say, what do you think to this proposal? And this person, hopefully, will come up with some ideas as to how you could mitigate the negatives. It could say, yes, well, it could take up more time, but we could also claw that time back by doing it this way. And they may also come up with some positives which no one else has considered yet. And you could say, well, what do you think is the way forward then? And they'll say, well, I think we should do this. Then that might be an alternative, or it might be your way. But either way, it's a way forward. So you've turned to this third person, asked them what the way forward might be. And then you go back to the original person, Andy in this case, the guy with partially bald head, and you revalidate his objections. You repeat what he said again back to him. You said, right, Andy, so you're concerned about the time, and you're concerned about this, and I agree that is an issue. And, remember that and bit, not but, and if we can do this, here are the potential benefits. And the way you're pitching this isn't so much as a sales pitch. You're pitching it as a, here are the pros, here are the cons. Let's look at this in a neutral way, an objective way, and together we can make a decision on what the best thing is for the team. It's not the best thing for me, it's the best thing for us as a whole. So you pitch you revalidate it back along with your opinion, and then you ask them, so how would you like to move forward on this? What do you think we should do? At which point, this person is probably either going to agree to what you want, or they will offer you a compromise or an alternative solution. They will feel compelled to give you something, which is better than giving you nothing. At that point, you want to try to, if possible, try to compromise or accommodate their solution as much as you possibly can. So just to briefly summarize then, be liked, be known, be trusted, build relationships, do your job, control your ego and assume they're right, tell the truth, no exaggerations, agree with them as much as you can. Less telling, more asking. Agree on the problem first, chunk it up to the problem, don't get stuck on the solution. Agree with them whenever you can, and if you can't agree with them, at least validate and affirm their views. Show that you respect that they have a right to say what they want to say. Ask them for the way forward rather than telling them the way forward, and try and accommodate where possible. And as of today, try and use the word and instead of but. Disagree in an agreeable way, and definitely no arguing. Now, if you would like to know more about this, if you found this remotely useful in any way, I do have a gift for you. It's not a small gift, it's quite a large one. I will give you full lifetime access to our Managing People Effectively online video course. Now, do not accept this without realizing this is a large course, so it's not something you can blag your way through in half an hour. It's 4 hours of interactive video tutorials. So it's quite the undertaking. So if you'd like to do it, just bear that in mind. It's a CPD certified course which will help you handle common day-to-day challenges that you might have with people. Disagreements, feedback, praise, conflict, all of the rest of it. Now, to get access to that, you can do it through our website. I'll send you the link in an email. Basically, use the promo code to buy it at £0, and you will need to use the email that you used to register for the webinar. It will not work for your colleagues. It will only work for you. If you use your personal email, use the personal email when you buy the course. Now, if anyone's got any questions, well, I see there are quite a few in the chat. I'll handle those by email. If anyone wants to hang back and stay on the call with me, by all means. If you want to speak with me personally, just email me. We'll have a video call or a telephone call. Either way, thank you for your time and attention. I'm honoured that so many people joined the call. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.